Your feet are pounding into dry grass, and the ground itself is shaking. 6 mammoths are closing the gap behind you, and there is no tree, no boulder, no refuge anywhere in sight. This is a mammoth stampede. So how does anyone survive this? A charging mammoth could cover ground faster than the fastest human alive. There is nowhere to outrun it. How does a body with 2 legs and a sharpened stick live through 6 tons of panicked animal with nowhere to hide? The answer is not what you'd guess. Some of it is going to change how you read that image up top by the time this ends. A woolly mammoth carried close to 6 tons on 4 legs the width of tree trunks. Picture the heaviest vehicle you've ever stood next to, then double it. Now give it a will of its own and 4 moving pillars for feet. Each footprint alone could be the size of a trash can lid. A mammoth didn't even need its tusks to kill you. Those tusks looked terrifying. Curved ivory blades sometimes taller than a grown man, but the real danger was underneath, the sheer weight coming down. Get run over by something that size and there is no wound to treat. There is nothing left to treat. Modern elephants, the mammoth's closest living relatives, can charge fast enough to leave a sprinting human gasping behind within seconds. And elephants are only a fraction of a mammoth's mass. Now, put 12 or 15 of them together, all moving at once, all committed to the same direction. You get something closer to a parking lot of buses rolling downhill than an animal. That's the physics of it. Mammoths were not naturally aggressive toward people. Most of the time, they wanted nothing to do with you at all. Something had to set that wall in motion first. Something specific had to go wrong. Mammoth herds worked like elephant herds, led by an old female who remembered where the water was. She also remembered which valleys had killed her before. Calves stayed in the center of the group. Aunts and cousins surrounded them on every side. Tusks facing outward like a fence made of living animal. Threaten a calf, and that fence turned into a charge in seconds. A lightning strike, a wildfire smell drifting in on the wind, a lion or a pack of dire wolves testing the edges of the herd. Any one of these could flip calm into full panic before a human even understood what had happened. And once one mammoth ran, the rest followed without asking why. That's herd instinct. Nobody stops to check the reason, they just move because everyone else is moving. Picture 2 mammoths standing 10 feet apart in the same herd. One is calmly stripping bark off a tree, completely unbothered. The other catches one whiff of a predator on the wind and its whole body locks up. Trunk raised, ears flared out like sails. 10 seconds later, they're both running in the same direction anyway, because that's how herd panic works. Calm is not a group decision. Panic is. That's what the tusk fence actually was, a wall made of living animals with nowhere soft in it. A predator testing the edge got the same response every time. A wave of trunks and tusks turned to face it at once, faster than the predator could pick a target. That defense worked against wolves and cats for a very long time. It did not work against a flash flood tearing through a ravine faster than 6 tons of alarmed animal could climb out of it. Paleontologists have actually dug up sites where an entire mammoth family group died together. Mothers, aunts, and young calves were buried in the same layer of mud. The shape is exactly what you'd expect from a protective circle overwhelmed all at once, likely by rushing water rather than any predator. It's a grim thing to look at on a dig map. Dozens of individual skeletons, still roughly arranged around where the smallest ones would have stood. I keep thinking about that formation, a wall of adults facing outward around babies who never had a chance to run anywhere. It tells you the defense was real. It also tells you it wasn't always enough, which means the humans caught in a stampede often had nothing to do with starting it. Wrong place, wrong 10 seconds. A fight between a mammoth herd and some completely different predator became your problem too. But sometimes it wasn't an accident at all. Sometimes it was the plan. Archaeologists have found mammoth bone beds in North America. Skeletons piled together at the bottom of dry ravines and sunken bogs, mixed in with stone spear points. Too many mammoths. Too close together. Too near a natural trap for it to be coincidence. The working theory is chilling in how simple it is. A small group of humans didn't try to fight a 6-ton animal head-on. They made it run somewhere that would kill it for them. I've read the reconstruction of how this worked, and it still doesn't sit right with me in the best way. A handful of people with fire and noise deliberately steered an animal that outweighed their entire camp combined. They pointed it toward a drop none of them could survive falling into themselves. Fire thrown at the edge of a herd. Shouting, drumming, anything loud enough to spook a matriarch into bolting, and once she ran, the whole herd ran behind her, straight toward a ravine the hunters had already picked out days earlier. One mammoth going down that ravine fed a camp for weeks. The stone points found jammed between the ribs weren't even the kill. They were the finishing move on an animal that had already broken its own legs in the fall. The mammoth did the dying. The stampede was the weapon. None of this happened by accident on the day it worked. Someone had to walk that ravine beforehand, in daylight, with no mammoth in sight, and decide this drop, not that one. This is where 6 tons of momentum turns into 6 tons of dead weight. That's planning done a full day, maybe several days before the herd ever showed up. The hunters who pulled it off weren't the strongest people in the camp. They were the ones who understood a mammoth's fear better than they understood their own. Directing that kind of panic without getting killed yourself took real skill. You never stood in front of a herd you'd just spooked, obviously. You also never stood directly behind it, because a slowing mammoth at the back could still turn and gore anything chasing it. The hunters worked the sides. Small groups spread wide along the flanks. They threw fire or rocks only when the herd started drifting off the intended line. It was like nudging 6 tons of terrified animal the way you'd nudge a shopping cart with a bad wheel. Except this shopping cart could kill you in one step if you misjudged the angle. Sound mattered as much as position. Mammoths, like elephants, communicated partly through low, rumbling calls too deep for a human ear to register as sound. You'd feel those calls as a pressure in your chest before you consciously heard anything at all. Hunters who spent enough time near herds learned to read that pressure. A change in the rumble meant a change in mood. A change in mood meant get out of the direct path right now, before the visible signs even caught up. This wasn't luck. I've read that this kind of body-level animal reading shows up across hunting cultures worldwide, completely independently. It still gets to me that people learned to feel an animal's intentions through the ground before its feet ever moved. Mammoths were not the only megafauna humans learned to steer instead of chase. In North America, later hunters used the exact same trick on bison herds. They drove them at a dead run toward cliffs with names that still make people flinch. Head smashed in. Buffalo Jump is one of them, a real place, and the name is not an exaggeration. Hunters wearing hides would trot along the flanks of a bison herd for miles, patient and quiet. The animals would just think they were another shape on the horizon. Then, at exactly the right moment, they'd burst into noise all at once. A wall of shouting, waving hides, anything loud enough to turn a slow drift into a dead sprint. It sent them straight over an edge the bison couldn't see coming until their front legs were already past it. Same principle as the mammoth ravines. You don't fight the animal's strength, you use its own panic as the weapon, and let gravity finish the job. The pile of bones at the bottom of that cliff grew for thousands of years, one drive at a time. The trick worked every single time someone got the timing right. It makes you wonder how many other animals got the same treatment before we ever wrote any of it down. How many of those tricks are just gone now, buried with the people who figured them out? They never had a reason to write any of it down. So, back to you. On that open plain, 3 of you running from a stampede none of you started. Here's what actually kept people alive in that exact situation. First, you never ran in a straight line away from the herd. A mammoth's momentum works against sharp turns. 6 tons doesn't pivot on a dime. Cutting sideways at even a shallow angle put real distance between you and the herd's actual path, faster than a dead sprint could. Second, you scattered. 3 bodies running in 3 different directions turned one obvious target into 3 separate problems. A panicked animal locks onto the nearest clear threat, not a spread out group. Third, and this is the part that saved more lives than anything else, even a small obstacle worked. A single tree, a low ridge, a fallen log barely as tall as your knee. A mammoth's instinct was to swerve around solid things rather than through them. It's the same way you'd steer around a parked car even in a full panic instead of driving straight through it. A person could flatten against the far side of one skinny tree. Mammoths would thunder past on either side, close enough to feel the wind off their bodies. Those odds were genuinely better than sprinting flat out across open ground with nothing beside you at all. That skill didn't stay small. Over thousands of years, human groups on more than one continent got frighteningly good at forcing panic into a herd on command. Which raises a question most people never think to ask. If our ancestors could reliably talk 6 tons of animal into running exactly where they wanted, generation after generation, what happened to the mammoths in the long run? Woolly mammoths didn't vanish overnight. Their range shrank first, herd by herd, region by region. That happened right around the same long stretch of time humans were spreading into every corner of the planet mammoths still called home. The climate was shifting too. Grasslands turning to forest and tundra, the mammoths couldn't graze the same way anymore. For a long time, researchers argued over which factor mattered more, the changing world or the hunting. The evidence now points at both pressing from opposite sides at once. This was a species that had already survived ice ages and predators for hundreds of thousands of years. Here's the reframe. That image up top, 3 tiny figures sprinting for their lives from a wall of mammoths, that's the honest fear of the moment. It was real, but zoom out far enough and the fear runs the other way. The last mainland woolly mammoths disappeared roughly 10,000 years ago. Some isolated populations clung on for thousands of years longer on remote islands, cut off from us entirely, and even those eventually blinked out. I still find it strange to say this out loud, but the last mammoths on Earth were alive at the same time as the pyramids. Not survivors from some distant age, actual contemporaries of people building stone monuments a continent away. They held out on a remote island far past the point every mainland herd was gone. They were cut off from the hunters and the changing grass alike. That lasted until roughly 4,000 years ago, when even that last refuge closed. No stampede finished them, no ravine, no fire, no shouting hunters. They just ran out of island. The species that could flatten a person without even slowing down lost in the end. It lost to the species that figured out where the ground gives way. You are looking at that thumbnail from the winning side. Every person alive right now is descended from people who learned to feel a rumble in their chest before their eyes caught up. They scattered instead of freezing, and found the one tree on an empty plain that made it count. The mammoths never got the chance to learn that trick back. Thanks for watching. All the sources and studies used in this video can be found in the description below.